I want to thank everybody for joining today from the different branches of LIR. My hopes for this training is that you just get a little bit of realistic insight on the compounding effect of long-term holds in real estate. I'm going to utilize my experience as an investor, going back now 20 years, 20 plus years actually, and sort of give you guys what's realistic, what some expectations may be, what are some of the myths out there when it comes to long-term holds, and how exactly does it impact us and in the real estate industry. How can you get involved with long-term holds and make it part of your portfolio? So diving right into that, the agenda is going to be, I'll introduce myself in a second and some of the stuff that, my background, visualizing your future self, building a foundation, when is the right time to start, sustaining the highs and lows of the market, and when should you sell and when should you hold. Okay, we're going to go over all of these topics. A little bit about myself. I started in real estate in 2010. I was a full-time police detective as I got my real estate license. I was a detective for almost 20 years. I retired as a police officer in the homicide division. I worked with the U.S. Marshal Service, and I retired in 2020. But during that time, I did find a love for investing and for real estate. So that being said, I always envisioned like for even when I first started as a rookie, when I went from having no money to making some money, I feel like the things that built where I'm at today was my decisiveness and some of the sacrifices I made at the beginning. So we will be talking about that in future slides, but that's just a little bit about myself. I'm now a partner in the West Palm Beach office. I've known George for about 35, 37 years, something like that. I knew him as a little kid. I tell everybody that I'm probably one of the only ones that remember him with curly hair. So that being said, it just was a perfect merger for me to come into lifestyle in 2019 when we did and launched West Palm Beach. So that's sort of a little bit of brief introduction about me. Disclaimers. Guys, this is projected. This is while it's what I utilize and numbers I give you are going to be realistic to the scenarios that I have lived through. I'm not here to compete with, oh, I could just do Bitcoin or I could just invest here or there. That's great. I'm not here to tell you that this is the only way. I'm just here to share with you why I feel long-term holds and the compounding effect of long-term holds can make a difference in your life. Now, with that being said, again, I'm also not going to be giving you advice on, what I think you should do tax-wise in your own situation or anything like that. We will briefly go over the fact that there's tax incentives, but it won't be where I'm your CPA. So that's the disclaimer. I'm not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. So, and I'm not in any other markets other than the open market for investing and in real estate. So that's the disclaimer. So let's talk about what the compounding effect actually is. The compounding effect is a concept that refers to a snowball effect that can occur when you consistently take actions over time. It can lead to significant results. Obviously, while we titled this training the compounding effect of uh, long-term holds in real estate, you can pretty much relate this to anything, right? Do is it going to be better to go to the gym once a week, or is it going to be better to go every day for 20 minutes? So the compounding effect can be, plug and play into any scenario. I'm just here to show you what it can do in this particular topic of long-term holds. Okay, so a little bit about that. Now, if you invested $50,000 in long-term holds versus open market investing. Now, when I say open market investing, I'm talking about more like stock markets, a plan, financial advisor sits with you, you open an account, whether you're investing in that. So in these scenarios, I actually got with a financial advisor that I know. He threw some numbers at me so that I can run them simultaneously with what I know the numbers are with long-term holds. So that's sort of what the glimpse is and what we're going to be looking at today. I use the number of 50,000 because while I've been asked before, well, how much do you need to start? Am I saying that you have to start with 50,000? No. Am I saying that you can have more and start with whatever it is that your number is? Of course. I'm just using 50,000 to give us sort of a bar to go through the numbers and sort of see what this does. Okay. Here's a 10-year snapshot. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and explain what I have on this page here. So a real estate hold at a 225. I used the purchase price of 225,000, by the way, which I left off of this and I should have included it so you guys see it. But what I utilized was a $225,000 property, and that your initial 50,000 will be utilized to acquire that property. Okay. Um, After 10 years of holding that property at an average of a 5% increase on the asset, which that's another thing that I should have mentioned in disclaimers. Obviously, there's going to be people that say, well, you can't say this automatically going to be 5%. I agree with you. It could be 10%, it could be 12%, it could be 3%, right? We don't know, we don't have a crystal ball, but I can tell you that properties that were purchased in 2000 are worth a lot more than a 5% increase per year. So I'm just using 5% to be sort of realistic in the scenario. Um, After 10 years, your asset that you bought for 225 would be worth $366,501. Okay, so that's pretty much a gain of about 140,000 just on the asset itself, on the value of the asset. Now, I utilized the 90% or a 10% vacancy on the rents, because again, I'm trying to be as realistic with my own properties. Have there been times that I've been vacant for 2 months out of the year? Yes. Has there been years that I get full rents for 6, 8 years running? Yes. So I figured 10% is a good number to go with, just to give you an idea. So in that same on that same asset, I'm using a 10% vacancy. I did it at $2,000, uh, a monthly rent of $2,000. So that gives you 240,000 over 10 years that a tenant has paid towards this asset. Uh, here's something that I think is interesting. How many of you are familiar with 401ks or programs and jobs that they match you dollar for dollar or whatever? Everybody familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, when I when I when I started out with my long-term holds, I wasn't as knowledgeable as I am today, obviously. So I did it more out of I started making some money. I didn't want to waste the money. I didn't want to be wasteful. I wanted to start something that I knew that long term could be a good situation. So that's how I started, honestly. It wasn't like I had all this knowledge when I started and I got into it. It really wasn't that way. I just sort of fell into it. And once I started seeing how this sort of all worked, I got a little bit more engulfed in it. So that being said, I talked about the 401k, your job matches you dollar for dollar. You can almost think of this as you've made the initial investment, okay, in the property, and while you have a 10% vacancy, you can look at your rent as a 401k almost. It's paying into the asset. Okay, it's paying into the asset. Whether you break even and make no money, which by the way isn't always a bad thing. Now, ideally, do you want to make money? Of course. But if an asset is paying for itself after your initial investments, you can pretty much look at that as a 401k. They're paying into this property and you're no longer paying for it. So that's one way of seeing it. Now you're gonna have depreciation and tax savings along the way of those 10 years. And I was very conservative with 120,000 because if you finance utilizing 50 grand, you got to finance about 180, 185 with closing costs. So your interest that you're going to be able to claim at the end of the year is probably going to be, somewhere in the 10,000 range just in interest. So a mortgage interest. So that along with depreciation and little, fixing here and there on those properties, I think 120,000 is a very conservative number. Now let's go to the right where it says open market at 10%. Now, 10% is also a very strong number. Like, can it be six? Can it be seven? Yeah. Could it be 12? Of course. Again, I'm using something to run side by side with the scenario. So if you did nothing else but drop the $50,000 into that open market, and made no monthly payments into that account, you would have $129,687 after 10 years. But let's say you dropped $500 a month, which is what's in parentheses. When you see next to account value, I have another value. That's if you started with 50,000 and then you put $500 a month. So $500 a month is $6,000 a year. It's equivalent to $60,000 that you've invested in addition to the 50 after 10 years. So that's why the account value is a little higher on the right side. Um, is it is it customary that you're gonna have some expenses with a rental? Of course. You're gonna have tenants that are gonna call you and say, hey, this isn't working or that isn't working. These are things that are come out of pocket. Hopefully you budgeted yourself accordingly. So I pretty much did the $500 investing into the open market to run simultaneous with what you may have as out of pocket expenses, even after the rent's paid. Because the truth is properties cost you money. And as insurances go up, taxes go up, values go up. The advantage of an open market, you're a mailbox investor, you know. So obviously those are them two running side. The 10-year snapshot. We're gonna go into the 20-year next. Any questions? Okay. Here's a 20-year snapshot. Okay, the hold remains at 5%. Now your asset that you bought at 225 is worth 596,000. You've gotten $480,000 in rent over that time period. Now notice here, I didn't raise the rent at all. I didn't put any raising of rent. So that's super conservative, utilizing these numbers. Um, Tax incentives, again, we talked about it in the first slide. Now you've got a tax incentive of 240 grand in 20 years, um, as opposed to in the open market. But if you get into an IRA, you could do tax deferred things like that. But in a regular account, you're really just investing into it, and you're not gonna have any write-offs. Account value at 336,000 if you only started with your 50 grand. And if you did the monthly contribution of $500, you would have 517,000, 547 after 20 years. Now this is a 20-year snapshot. Okay. Um, I have properties that I'm holding now for year 22 and 23. So I can tell you that um, those properties have overperformed on this what we're seeing here. So I mean, again, very conservative numbers. Uh, it's I think realistic for what it is. I'm gonna stop here. Any questions so far? Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's go into the 30-year snapshot. Okay, now year 30, what I did was I dropped the asset gain to 3% for the last 10 years. Why? Because I wanted to be extra frugal on the numbers. Now, when you guys budget yourselves, I don't know about you, but I always like to use worst case scenario, meaning if I know I'm gonna make $10 next month, I say I'm gonna make 8. That's the way I do my numbers. It's always to give myself a little bit more leeway and so that my numbers always fall with space. That's sort of why I did a 3% increase on the back 10 of that property. So the asset now is worth 802,000. This is after 30 years. Okay. Your initial investment into the property was 225 is what you purchased it for. You've gotten $720,000 in rent. Again, this is with zero increases from year 1 to year 30. So you've gotten $720,000 in rent. Remember, I talked about that looking sort of like a 401k. It's basically paid itself. Your tax incentives are there. Your total cash investment has been 150,000. That's 50,000 plus about $100,000 in repairs and renovations. Now, the way I calculated this was I figure about every 15 years, your major functions of a house are going to need repair or replacement. And yes, again, some people say, well, you can have a roof for 25 years. Yes, you can. But I'm running it on a projection of 15 years. So if I drop, if I bought the property today and I put $50,000 to renovate it, and in 15 years, I got to put another 50,000 to get it repaired and renovated. I think that's more than suffice for the property that we're talking about. Okay. So that's also super realistic. Now, this property has generated $1,297,305 plus your 360,000 in tax savings. So that's basically what this property has gained. If you took the 802,305 minus your purchase price, okay, that's going to give you somewhere in the ballpark of $575,000. Plus, you made $720,000 in rent, and plus you have the cash, the tax incentives. So this property, that's how it's performed on a 30-year snapshot. Okay, your open market at 10%. If you made no contributions, it would be 336,374. If you again made your contributions of $500 a month, you would have paid 180,000 over 30 years in contributions. So your total cash invested would have been 230,000, and your account would be worth about 882,000. Now this is liquid money. Um, so those two running side by side. Okay. Now, the reason I thought that this was important was, I remember, like, when I first started, and I started making money, everybody was reaching out to be like, oh, you want to invest here, you want to invest there. I mean, you, trust me, if nobody's reaching out to you for investments, as soon as you start making money, they're going to start reaching out. Okay. So I always thought of, I want to have an investment that's tangible that I can touch. That's always the way I've been, with it. And so that's the reason I like it. I like an asset that I'm actually physically, in touch with. I understand open market, you have an account, you have money, it's a monthly statement. It's just a preference. Okay. Any questions after the 30-year snapshot?
I have a question. Just from your experience doing
Mhm.
this, overall, like what would you say is an expense that stands out to you the most when dealing with these properties, or a repair that you've had to do maybe multiple times, just from your experience?
Great question. So here's the thing. Like, I think if you budget and you maintain a property, your bigger expenses will be things that were going to be inevitable anyway. I'm going to give you an example. We all know that cast iron was what homes had when they were first built in the 60s and 70s. There was cast iron pipes all over the place, 50s, 60s, 70s. Um, the idea is that I can maintain a property as nice as I want. I can replace the roof. I can make sure the windows are always caulked and the doors are always sealed, and things that I can do as a landlord. But that cast iron pipe eventually is going to come to a head, and I'm going to have to do something with it. So when you purchase a property, the things that I tend to see are those that I know are the inevitable, elephant in the room that are going to show their head at some point. So if I buy a house and it has cast iron pipes, polybutylene pipes, which we know the insurance companies don't want to deal with. Plumbing is a big thing. Florida is known, we know this, based on our climate. What's the number one damage that people report in Florida is water damage. It's mold. It's the infestation of mold. So knowing that, I think that you can maintain a home as much as you want, but if I would say that there's one place you got to pay special attention to, it's your plumbing. I feel like there's 1,000 roofers, but when you have to get under a house and change plumbing or break a floor to change plumbing, that gets very expensive. Any other questions? Okay, so we're gonna move now into visualizing your future self. Okay, I can share my experience that, when I started investing, it was out of necessity. Okay, I was 19 years old. My father was very ill. I lived with my mother at the time. I was going to college. My father passed away, and I remember telling myself like, okay, I gotta basically grow up overnight. I never had those opportunities to um, really go out and be a kid from that point on. Like it basically was overnight that I had to do this. So that being said, when you visualize your future self, your experiences come into play when it comes to investing. I know that I'm sort of going on to a different realm, if you will, but hear me on this. You need to walk your walk. You can't walk somebody else's walk. You need to know what's good for you. You need to be decisive. You need to know what it is that you're comfortable with. Whether you see it all over Instagram that people are saying you shouldn't, if you look at something and it looks good to you and you have a plan for it, be decisive. Okay. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a property on the MLS sitting for 150, 200 days and nobody's batting an eye on it. And I go see it in person and say, holy crap, with a few tweaks, I can change this thing up and I can turn it into a solid rental. Like that has happened countless amounts of time for me throughout this past 20 years. Where you are in your walk and your journey in investing is also where you have to start. Like if you are just starting out, just curious, it's great that you're on here. Um, but your decisiveness is what's going to take you to the next level. And being decisive means if you see an opportunity and it feels right to you, go for it. Don't worry about people telling you, oh, well, there's always going to be those people. They're not pulling the triggers. Trust me that if I hadn't pulled the triggers when I did when I was 19 years old, freshly have lost my father and picked up the mortgage for my mom, uh, I wouldn't have been able to be where I am today. So understand, visualize where you want to see yourself, what this looks like for everybody in their own situation, and just go with that. So I think that that's a huge thing is visualizing what it is that you would like to see in your future for these investments. Okay. Building your foundation. So going back to, how I told you when I first started, it was basically I'm pretty much if you're new starting off, like I said, and you're not in the investment world, that's where I was. All I knew is that I had some money and I wanted to invest. So how did I do it? Like basically building a foundation of budgeting is important, like sacrifice is important. I should also say that I didn't drive a new car until I was about 27, 28 years old, even though I had the money to. I didn't drive a new car. I was always in a used car, 2, 3 years old, and I would hold those cars for 3, 4 years. So I think it's important for you guys to see where it is that you can make sacrifices in your own life if you're serious about investing and start making those decisions and being decisive with it. Because the sooner that you can build a foundation of, okay, I'm saving, I'm feeling better, I've got some money, the sooner that you can get on with the actual investment. So getting there, I've had people say, where should I start? I think you should start with a solid budget. I think you should start with saving money, and being consistent with it. I don't think you do it if, let's say, you came across, some money, but you're horrible at budgeting. Then you're not ready, to be honest. Just because you have that money, I wouldn't say that you jump right into it. I think you really have to start off with baby steps and getting yourself to the point where you are saving money monthly before you get into this. Okay. So that's a little bit about that. When is the right time to start? I think I just spoke about that a little bit, but to touch on it a little further, um, the right time to start is when you feel that it's your time. Like if I've run into so many people with so much knowledge, so much potential, and they say I wanna invest, and then I look at where I was as a 19-year-old, and I say I had half the knowledge that they had. I'd had half the money and half of the experience. And but what I did have was that I was decisive. I was someone that if I saw something and I thought it was good, I went for it. I wouldn't be the person to beat it up on paper 10, 15 times over to find a reason not to buy it. That's not me. So I think that when you think about when is the right time to start, when your mindset says enough, I need to do something in my life, I need to make something, I need to make something happen. I've got some money. I don't want it sitting at a bank making $0. And I'm doing well, start. Like as soon as you can start. If that was yesterday, then it was yesterday. Because the sooner you get in, the better the outcome and the longer you'll have that investment working for you. Sustaining the highs and lows of the market, um, throughout the longest hold I have right now, I believe is 23 years. So I've sustained a few markets already with that investment. Here's what I'll tell you is if you do get into an investment and you start doing well with it and it's renting out on its own, um, I wouldn't over leverage yourself. Meaning, let's say like in the same snapshot of 10 years into the mortgage payments, you now owe, 150,000 on that house and you have some equity. Don't go pulling credit lines to weigh those investments down. You're gonna find that there's levity and you're gonna feel better, knowing that you have that equity in those properties to move on to the next property, but while you have maintained a budget, while you have maintained your own savings, while you have done things, to get you to the point to get another one. I don't tend to pull from one to get another one. There is the Burr method out there, which is buy, I think it's like renovate, rent, and repeat, and refinance. So it's like a bunch of R's. I don't, I'm not, I'm not that guy. Okay. Now, can that work? Yeah. Um, is there instances that it could be better suited to use the Burr method than others? Yeah. But what I'm telling you is that if you have a good investment, you've made a good investment, it's renting out on its own, it's making your monthly payment, it's making a little bit of money for you. And that property is what quote unquote settled is what I call it. When I settle a property, that means that it's renting on its own and it's paying itself and it's no longer a burden to me. It's an asset. So when I settle a property, I leave it alone. Why do I do that? Well, I do that because I know that one day in the future, when I visualize my future and I visualize, okay, I want to have more than one kid. I'm going to be married. Kids are going to go to college. Kids are going to get married, all that kind of stuff. When I visualize that in the whole scheme of things, I pretty much invested knowing that these properties one day will be what will be the catalyst for me to afford, regardless of what my job does, regardless of how the industry goes, that these properties would be able to help sustain me in the future. So when you're looking at highs and lows of a market, the reason why investors fall victim to some investments and then a market hits them and they can't sustain it is because they've over leveraged themselves in that market. They're pulling out every dollar that they can off that property, like right now, and not allowing that property to resonate, not allowing it to marinate and to do what it should do for you in the future. So don't get too high, don't get too low. If you have a property and it's settled, it's doing good, it's paying it for itself, leave it alone. Start saving for the next property. The the day is gonna come when you have, over 10, 15 properties, and you're gonna tell yourself, holy crap, I just have all these properties, and the compounding effect of the equity has made me into a wealthy person. And that is the idea behind this strategy. To me, it's not about pulling out the money right now and over leveraging. It's about leaving it and allowing it to continue to pay itself. Look at it as a 401k, and every property you get an additional 401k. That's the way I see it. Okay. Going to the next thing. When should you sell and when should you hold? Okay. I had a
I
daughter,
had a question. I'm
have,
sorry. I
okay,
had
go
a
ahead.
question before you moved on.
Okay.
It's about like I know you said not to pull out of one property into the next, but
Right.
for those who started out like at a later age group than 17 or 20 years old, what advice would you give those people? Is it the same advice to just wait and see? Because you know, at that point in their life, they're much older now and they're just starting out. How long between should they go ahead and try to get something else?
That's a great question and a valid one. If I hadn't had the experiences I had and I start today at the age of 47, I'm gonna want to put liquid fuel all over this fire, right? That's pretty much the concept. I'm gonna tell you that while I do that, I'm gonna be very conservative. I'm gonna give you an example. If you purchase a property now at, let's say, whatever age, but you're not 19, let's say you're 40 years old and you're gonna purchase your first property. Um, what I would tell you is don't over leverage yourself to the point where you can no longer pull anything from that property should anything go sideways. So while I tell you that in my particular situation, I was able to leave a lot of my properties to sit and to continue to gain equity, one of my thoughts always, as I told you, I'm someone that I always look at a worst case scenario. I want to have a plan A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, that's the way I operate. I look at it as that property now, if I let it settle, then I have equity in there. So if anything happens to me tomorrow or to one of my family members, or I urgently need to take out the money's there. But to answer your question and more specific, the same way that you would invest in a property at 19, you invest in the same property at 40. The difference being is that maybe later on in life, you have a little bit more money, in which case you can put a larger down, or do you split your money? Meaning you have $100,000 saved. Do you do 50 on one property, 50 on another, and start leveraging yourself in that manner? Because while you were at a disadvantage that I started at 19, many people that start older also have a better platform for getting money and having money. So I do think that as long as you don't over leverage yourself, I don't like to pull any property more than 75% leverage ever, like ever. So if a property is worth 100,000, I will make sure that I don't owe any more than 75,000. And in most cases, most of my properties are 50% leveraged, at most. But for someone that's older, I would say 75% is the highest you want to go leveraging yourself to get into the next property.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Yep. When should you sell and when should you hold? All right, we talked about the highs and lows of a market. And again, it's the same, it happens in the same in every market. Like when the stock market tanks, everybody, there's a lot of people that pretty much panic and, oh my God, I got to sell this, I got to get out of this as soon as I can. Well, that's really not the time to get out, right? Because you've bought at a certain number and then you're gonna sell it when it's low. So you pretty much bought it when it was high or moderate, and now you're gonna sell it when it's low. That doesn't make sense. Same thing can be said for real estate. As long as as long as you're making a sound decision, um, then really when you should sell should depend on what it is that you have going on in your life. I started off this slide by saying I have three kids. I have two in college and I have one still at home. Well, the one of them that's in college, that college was a little bit more expensive. Being that I invested in real estate since I was very young, I didn't really put my money into anything else. So I didn't do a college saving plan, and I could have, and I never did that. So what did I do? I took one of my properties, the one that I thought I didn't like the most, And I basically said, you know what, I'm gonna sell this property now. I held it for many years, and the property more than paid for college, and and it served its purpose. So when you look at an investment and when you should sell, it should fall into a plan that you've made for you and customized for you in your future. That was something that I always thought. You know, when my kids get older, they're gonna go to college, they're gonna get married. Maybe I sell another one when one gets married. I don't know. Maybe I don't. But the idea is that it's there. So these are your earmarks along the way to help you to get to what it is that you want to accomplish in life. Maybe you want to retire overseas and all you want to do is travel. Whatever the case is, one of these properties, two of these properties, three, four, five that you're holding, you can make all that with one property. And that could be the difference between what your future looks like with investing and not. So I'm never going to tell you that you should absolutely sell in a certain market. I think that's a mistake. I think that the better advice that I can give you is look at your plan for the future, look at what you have going on in your life, and start telling yourself, when am I going to start needing money? So how long should I invest in this? That's the question. When can I project that I'm going to start needing money, and how long will that investment take, or where would it be? Run the same numbers that I ran for you today on these slideshows, and start seeing like what could it look like. Okay, that's really the best advice I can give you on that. Any questions? Okay.
Hey, I have a question. When do you project on when to purchase another property, or you have a goal and I mean you have your cap on how many property you gonna buy and hold for long term?
Okay. Yep. Good question. What I like to do is as soon as I settle a property, okay, I think I mentioned settling. Settling is when I buy a property, I put my initial investment into it, it's fully rented, and I have at least 4 months of reserves. Then I start building towards the next one right away. Um, here's the advantage that we are in this industry. I'm gonna give you guys this um tidbit, and some of you may already know this and be aware, and it's just a thing where now you need to make it happen. We're the ones, we're the real estate dealers, guys. We're the ones that are seeing the deals. We're the ones that are working this to its potential, where being very familiar with an area that you feel comfortable investing in and sticking with it and being consistent, excuse me, and marketing yourself as a traditional real estate agent and investor, you can get and take advantage of things that will come across your laptop, and it can be a great investment, and you're like one of the first ones to see it. Like, we are in that industry. It's the reason why real estate has created so many millionaires and billionaires. There's rarely someone that's a billionaire or millionaire that doesn't own real estate. Like, and we're dealing the stuff. So to answer your question, more detailed, is I go for the next property as soon as I have one rented out and I have 4 months of budget for that property saved. I'm already working towards the next one. Now, for me, as I close deals in the traditional side of real estate, what I'll do is, if I already made that investment and I have a rental moving, my very next commission, I'm sacrificing. Like, again, it's going to come down to sacrificing. Some people will make a lot of money in the industry and make zero investments in real estate. Make a lot of money in our industry, make zero investments in real estate. Well, um, let's fast forward 20 years. I mean, my headshot 20 years from now is going to be when I was 25 years old, and then people are going to see me on a showing and say, wow, this guy's still working. That's not where I want to be. Where I want to be is, I want these investments to work for me, and while I'm making money, I'm going to make sure that I put the money in a solid and sound investment. This has been solid for me, not suggesting that there's not other things that you can invest in, as I said at the beginning. What I'm telling you is that if you continue and you're consistent, as you go making money, and you tell yourself, I'm going to sacrifice this commission check, could be $20,000. We all know that the average home sale right now, you're making 12, 15 grand. So you have a few closings and you start saying, I'm gonna start sacrificing some money towards my investment fund and start saving that. And as soon as you have it, get the next one and get the next one. I had a great year in 2021, I think it was, where I was able to acquire 5 properties. But it was because I kept my head on a swivel. And I was like, I had a good year in my own business and selling homes, and I was able to sacrifice. But everybody has to go at their pace and do their own walk. But what I'm telling you is that without sacrifice, you also don't get there. Any other questions?
Brother, I got a couple of questions. Number one, how much are you putting aside for war chest, for reserves, or stuff like that?
I'm putting a minimum of 4 months of reserves when I look at a property, and when I run my numbers on the initial investment of that property, I'm already putting 4 to 6 months of reserves.
Okay. Do you do your own property management?
I have a crew that works under me that are basically a GC that he has his handyman, but I am also capable of doing like minor stuff. Like I'm not someone that's gonna run out there and remodel the kitchen, but I can change a flapper on a toilet. But I do have a team that um works on my properties.
All right. And the last question, do all your properties cash flow?
I have every single property cash flowing at this moment.
All right.
But I will tell you that they didn't always cash flow. So, there was times
Okay.
that,
All right.
it was a little tighter, and then rents started going up, and then some of them cash flow better than others.
All right. Thanks, man.
And to touch on the question of reserves and what we keep on reserves, I want to also let you know that your lender, in my case, I work with Vice City and Beatrice and Dottie and Johnny, and they're gonna go for, if they go for any type of loan on an investment, um, you sort of want to have about 6 months of reserves on each property, because when they go underwrite you for another investment, they're gonna want to see liquid reserves. So you want to try to have 4 to 6 months, 6 months preferably. And as you go building, you'll see that it's not as hard as it sounds, guys. When a property starts settling itself, you're gonna see that you're gonna do it's gonna start making you money, and you're gonna see that it starts building on its own. Any other questions? Any other questions about um long-term holds? Okay. Now, I also will tell you that I flipped several homes in the same time that I was a long-term investor. So meaning I flipped houses, and I also bought some of those same flips or kept some of those same flips as long-term holds. The advantage, again, going back to some of the advantages we have as agents, is that we can go into a flip and not even know that it's a good long-term hold until you've done the renovation and start running your numbers for real. I've had some flips where I said, oh, I'm gonna project to make, 50, $75,000 on a flip. And then, you know, a few weeks before finishing the project, someone swings by and says, hey, are you open to renting that place? And I'm like, not really. And then I think about it and say, well, shit, how much? And it's a number where I say, well, I can potentially keep this property, and it can cash flow of a little bit, or even just pay itself, and I'm in the position that I can do it, then I hold it. So there's so many options when it comes to how you can build cash flow for yourself. I've done several flips that obviously have helped me purchase my long-term holds as well. So in the same they work hand in hand though. And again, it's all going to come down to where you're at and what it is that you want to accomplish. So just keep that in mind. Any other questions? Anything else at all? Everybody good?
Yes, so far.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and share my information on this last slide. So if you have any questions in the future, if you have any questions or you're running a property for yourself and you need the assistance, you know, that's my contact information. You know, feel free to reach out. Basically I wanted to leave you with a nugget. The nugget that I'm gonna leave you with is that, as I told you, when I was 19 years old, I lost my father. My mother was gonna lose the house. My sister was in college. I needed to step up and work, so I did that. And that same year, not even a year after my father passed away, I made my first investment in Sunny Isles. It was $70,000 at the time, oceanfront. And I kept that property, and next month that property is going to be selling for 1.4 million. So I leave you with that, not to, you know, brag or anything like that. Trust me, it's not anything like that. It's to tell you, at the lowest point of my life, when I said I had just lost my dad, I could have made every excuse in the world not to buy something. I bought something. And it ended up being a nugget that later on is gonna be something that can really make a difference. So try to be decisive in what you guys do, and try to do it with your best intent moving forward, and don't be afraid. Like, at the end of the day, real estate gets sold all the time. Worst case scenario, you tried and you have to sell it, it's okay. But do I know anybody that's in that situation? I can tell you I don't. The people that have been decisive and have gone for it, they don't look back. So I hope that helps, guys. Thank you for joining. Thank you for hearing me out, and a little bit about, you know, how this has helped me in my life. And I definitely appreciate all of you.
Thank you, Marco.